June 25th, 1950. The Korean War is set in motion. America had taken it upon itself to try and stop the spread of communism, something the US felt South Korea was vulnerable to succumb to if it wasn't to intervene. In an attempt to reduce the number of casualties in the front lines, the US decided to deploy a military project in development since 1948. MASH, an abbreviation of Mobile Army Surgical Hospital, were units of mainly civilian doctors and nurses deployed close to the front lines during the Korean War. The goal of a MASH was simple: save lives. Triage adopted the dictum, life takes precedence over limb, function over anatomical defects. MASH units were not meant to bring one back to full health. Rather, they functioned to, at best, get a soldier back into action, and at worst, patch one up well enough so they can be sent back home. Now we jump way ahead to January 25th, 1970. A movie by the name of MASH releases in theaters. A rough adaptation of a book of the same name, which itself was a rough recounting and romanticization of the happenings of wartime surgeons during the Korean War, MASH was a hit amongst audiences, with both reviews of the time and modern reviews praising its comedy, authenticity, and overall presentation. MASH grossed somewhere between $41 and $81 million in its first year of release alone, though it isn't exactly clear which of these two numbers is accurate, nor if these numbers are adjusted for inflation. What was clear, though, was that by the close of 1970, MASH was the second highest grossing comedy of all time. This prompted CBS to greenlight a television adaptation of the novel, something that at the time may have seemed like a simple financial decision, but would eventually become one of the most important projects in their history. September 17th, 1972. MASH had a lot of particularly interesting episodes delving into varying serious topics, with most existing in later seasons. That said, there's one particular episode in Season 1 that predicted the tone MASH would later fully embrace, and in order to understand its importance, we need to take a look back at the episodes that precede it. On the surface, MASH seems like your typical war comedy of the era. Throughout the first season, classic tropes of the genre are prevalent. The first episode is your typical pilot, with the characters being introduced one by one with a joke for each of them. There's Radar O'Reilly and Colonel Henry Blake.
Radar! Sir. Damn it, Radar. How many times must I...
Yes, sir. I've alerted the General's pilot, so he's ready to take off at any time.
Now, I want you to alert the General's pilot to be ready to take off at any time.
I said that.
And that's an order.
The titular Hawkeye and Trapper.
I keep telling you, we gotta give up this preoccupation with keeping people alive or we'll never get out of here.
It's no use. We're doomed.
Maybe we should start using rusty instruments.
Stop washing our hands.
Raise our prices.
And lastly, Majors Frank Burns and Margaret Houlihan.
There are ladies present.
Oh, sorry, baby.
Major to you.
Why, sorry, Major, baby.
The next three episodes follow what you'd expect for a war sitcom at the time. The MASH dealing with the black market stealing their supplies, Hawkeye and Trapper fighting over a girl.
Unpacking? Let us help.
We're awfully glad you picked our unit. We're not as large as some of the others, but we are friendly.
Very friendly.
Actually, we never met a nurse we didn't like.
Frank trying to press charges against Hawkeye for insubordination. Episode 5 is the first hint of something more, with the plot focusing on a more serious topic, a soldier coming onto the MASH with a moose, a slang term for a slave. MASH handles a topic of this magnitude as respectfully as a sitcom can, but there are times where the comedy feels very forced. This episode is important for what I would consider MASH dipping their toes into some serious storytelling, though not yet fully pulling the trigger. Episode 6 would fully realize this, and set a precedent for what MASH would be going forward. We open on a war general, Brigadier General Crandall Clayton, who's been convinced by a war filmographer to participate in a fully fledged documentary about the ongoing war, something positive to send to the families back home. General Clayton decides that the best way to show positivity in such a dire situation would be to show a MASH unit at work, and what better unit to show than the 4077, who, as he proclaims, are the highest performing MASH in the war. The director arrives at camp, and after discovering Hawkeye's interesting sense of humor,
I've had a little experience, Lieutenant. Amateur production in college. I played Romeo.
And Juliet.
he decides to cast Hawkeye as the lead of the documentary. This documentary is eventually completed, though not without the director and his crew being very distracting to the surgeons of the 4077. And yet despite this, Hawkeye would ultimately have a distaste for the disingenuous style the director was going for, and would destroy the tapes under the cover of night. After sending the director and his crew packing, seemingly out of the blue, Hawkeye tries to, and successfully convinces Colonel Blake to let the MASH keep the camera and all the director's equipment. Hawkeye didn't just want to star in this documentary, he wanted to direct it.
You still got Bricker's script?
I hope so.
Henry, we can make this movie ourselves.
There's a montage of the MASH under Hawkeye's direction, slowly recreating many of the scenes seen in the original documentary. Of course, though, when the documentary is finished and presented to the MASH, Hawkeye's vision is a bit unorthodox.
This is the 4077th Mobile Army Surgical Hospital, somewhere in Korea. Not a very attractive military post, mainly because the men of the 4077th have no time for anything but the vital work they do.
Gosh, I'm glad they brought me here.
Wait a minute, have you got a reservation?
A reservation?
I'm afraid we're all booked up through New Year's.
And there are those rare moments when these saints in surgical garb may relax with simple, wholesome pleasure.
Gentlemen, I give you the war.
All seems very typical of Hawkeye, until this.
3 hours ago, this man was in a battle. 2 hours ago, we operated on him. He's got a 50-50 chance. We win some, we lose some. That's what it's all about. No promises, no guaranteed survival, no saints in surgical garb. Our willingness, our experience, our technique are not enough. Guns and bombs and anti-personnel mines have more power to take life than we have to preserve it. Not a very happy ending for a movie. But then no war is a movie.
This one scene stands as a representation of what MASH would eventually become, and what it would be most well known for, its subject matter. In future seasons, MASH wouldn't shy away from serious topics, and towards the end of its run, it could be argued that it had transcended its original status as a comedy. It had become a full-on commentary on the tragedies of the war it was based on. MASH is special. It started as a generic cash grab, and over 11 seasons, 11 seasons, which even today is completely unheard of, it created a legacy. Up until very recently, its finale was the highest viewed television program of all time. MASH is a remnant of a bygone era of television, an era where the viewer was kept engaged by a not entirely inaccurate dramatization of a real-world event, instead of which superhero died in a CGI shitstorm. And I say that as an MCU fan. Though its comedy may be dated and sometimes a bit insensitive, it transcended its comedic origins to become something more, something thought-provoking. I may be generations removed from its intended audience, but even so, MASH will forever have a special place in my heart, as the show that became so much more than a cash grab.